On your left is the LG G1 with OLED Evo technology. On your right is the Sony A90J Master Series OLED. These are LG's and Sony's flagship 4K BOLED, my acronym for Bright OLED, designed to deliver higher peak brightness than conventional OLEDs. But which one is more suitable for the type of content you watch? Let me show you by occasionally using a mastering monitor worth £30,000 as reference. This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Hello everyone, Vincent Teo from HDTV Test here. Both the LG G1 on your left and the Sony A90J on your right are 55 inches in screen size, providing a level playing field for us to judge upscaling and motion performance. Near black handling is normally the first thing we check on every OLED television we review, and on this moving quantization pattern developed by Stacy Spears of Spears & Mansell fame, both TVs managed to suppress above black chrominance overshoot quite effectively. The above black gradation on the Sony A90J was superior initially in the darkest regions, but dropped off a cliff pretty soon due to overbrightened near black gamma, which could not be fully corrected, since Sony's 20-point grayscale controls only went down to 4.6% video stimulus. When compared to a Sony BVM HX310 mastering monitor which tracked 2.4 gamma linearly using this black clipping pattern from the AVS HD test disc, you can see that there's a big jump in brightness from levels 19 to 20 on our A90J retail unit, causing levels 20 to 25 to look much the same and lacking in tonal differentiation. Translated to real-world viewing, this dark scene from Game of Thrones appeared more washed out with harsher transitions on the Bravia A90J, whereas the LG G1 came closer to matching the reference monitor after calibration. There are various tricks you can use to improve the near-black presentation on the Sony A90J Master Series OLED, such as reducing the video black level to 49, or engaging blackframe insertion via the motion flow clearness setting. But it cannot be completely fixed, since these controls are quite coarse and would affect other parts of the picture. You are basically just shifting the problematic zone around. You can make things look right for one particular scene, but another scene with a slightly different APL or average picture level will require further adjustments, which of course doesn't qualify as a fix. Furthermore, because Sony has designed its TVs to carry over the black level and clearness settings from SDR to HDR within the same picture preset, and its Kalman AutoCal algorithm to run on a black level of 50 and a contrast of 100, there's very little you can do without negatively impacting on the accuracy elsewhere. Please note that not all dark scenes will be affected, but when certain portions of a film fall within the trouble zone of the Sony A90J, where near black gamma is overbrightened and shadow detail is more compressed, such as this sequence from the 4K Blu-ray of Arrival, the picture on the Sony A90J would look flatter and lacking in dark detail, especially when referenced against the mastering monitor. Both the LG G1 and the Sony A90J are equipped with the latest OLED panel from LG Display's Guangzhou factory, and so boasted some of the best near-black uniformity we have observed on consumer OLED televisions, with minimal thin vertical streaks. Our A90J review unit did appear cleaner than our LG G1 sample, possibly helped by the Sony's brighter near-black gamma. The eagle-eyed among you may also have noticed the big luminous jump between 1 and 2% video stimulus on the A90J. In terms of SDR colors, both OLED televisions could be calibrated to an accurate degree to provide a close match to the Sony HX310 reference monitor. Talking of which, I am in the process of putting together a calibration service in partnership with a UK electrical retailer, and this information website has been created using Squarespace, an all-in-one platform that makes it super easy to build your online presence. Any website you create will be mobile optimized, which means it will look great on a smartphone, tablet, laptop or computer monitor. You will also gain access to analytics and SEO tools to grow your business. So if you are looking to start a website or an online store, head to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you are ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/HDTV test to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thanks again for your support. Okay, when discussing the motion performance on these two televisions, I think it is important to distinguish between lower frame rates such as 24 frames per second and higher frame rates such as 50 or 60 frames per second. Let's start with 24 frames per second. With all motion settings disabled, both the LG G1 and the Sony A90J presented slow panning shots in 24 FPS movies correctly without telecinic judder. Nevertheless, some viewers are extremely sensitive to even the mild stutter inherent in 24p films, which is more obvious on OLED due to its near-instantaneous pixel response time. To tackle this issue, LG has come up with a new cinematic movement setting on the company's 2021 OLEDs including the G1, which incurred even less soap-opera effect or SOE than Smoothness 1 on the A90J, as well as less interpolation artifacts such as sparklies on our own custom-authored test pattern. That said, Sony's motion flow technology was generally less prone to introducing microstutter than LG's True Motion system across most types of content. For example, this 50Hz broadcast program from the UK, presumably recorded before the pandemic. I don't know when was the last time I sat this close to another person without wearing a mask. With all motion settings disabled, both the LG G1 and the Sony A90J return a sample and hold motion resolution of 300 lines, although the A90J exhibited some tearing artifacts at the 170 level, suggesting always-on motion interpolation under the hood. Engaging True Motion and motion flow interpolation respectively would increase motion resolution to 650 lines, which could be boosted even further to 1080 lines or higher by activating 120Hz black frame insertion or BFI on both televisions. Even though this year LG has implemented a 1D LUT offset to reduce the shadow detail loss with OLED Motion Pro 120Hz BFI engaged on the company's 2021 OLEDs including the G1, running Kalman's AutoCal procedure would override the compensatory 1D LUT in that particular picture preset, leading to crushed shadow detail once you enable OLED Motion Pro. Overall, we think Sony's motion flow technology is less likely to cause problems in real-world viewing. To assess upscaling, we first put up this SMPTE RP133 test card in 576i, and found the Sony's upconversion to be slightly cleaner with less junk pixels and overshoot. In real-world standard definition content, such as this grubby broadcast from ITV3 in the UK, the difference was marginal at best, with the Sony A90J possibly rendering the grass on the lawn and the pattern on the sweater in a slightly sharper manner. Going up to 720 and 1080 resolution was when the A90J started pulling ahead of the G1. There's just visibly more depth and detail, with random objects such as strands of hair and creases on clothing being easier to pick out, and things in motion appearing less blurry. It seemed that the higher the resolution of the source video you feed to the Sony A90J, the more the material its onboard Bravia XR cognitive processor can work with to increase the perceived sharpness of the picture, not through traditional edge enhancement methods, but by localized gamma adjustments, which you can see spreading gradually on this Luma zoom plate pattern. The only way to disable the processing completely was by engaging game or graphics mode. Some purists, including myself, will ask, does this undefeatable Bravia XR processing not deviate from the creative intent? To answer this question, I used the 31-inch Sony HX310 mastering monitor as reference in a side-by-side comparison, and like a boomerang that got me wondering why it's looking bigger and bigger, it hit me. You know how videos generally appear sharper on a smaller screen? Well, the Bravia XR processing made the perceived sharpness on the 55-inch Sony A90J come closer to matching the natural sharpness of the 31-inch Sony HX310, more so than what the LG G1 managed to achieve. Otherwise, the G1 suppressed jaggies slightly better in video-based interlaced material, although both OLEDs still exhibited some jagged edges on the third bouncing bar in this test pattern from the HQV benchmark disc. With their respective film mode interlacing setting enabled, both TVs correctly detected and processed 3.2 and 2.2 cadences in film-based interlaced content. Note that while the film mode high setting on the Sony A90J was necessary to extract smooth 24p motion from the internal TV apps which operated at 60Hz, it could also introduce some stutter and tearing artifacts in broadcast programs with mixed edits, which fortunately could be eradicated by switching film mode to the less aggressive low setting. Both our test units featured excellent bright uniformity, manifesting no significant banding, dirty screen effect or color tinting on full-field gray slides. Both the LG G1 and the Sony A90J carry the latest, more efficient OLED panels from LG Display's Guangzhou fab, which typically suffer from faint horizontal lines or what we call the Venetian blind effect in very bright HDR elements on screen, especially in HDR. The Venetian blind effect looked more obvious on our A90J retail sample, maybe because the presence of a metallic heatsink emboldened Sony to drive it brighter, whereas it's barely noticeable on our LG G1 review unit. On our own custom-authored automatic brightness limiter or ABL pattern, the Sony A90J ABL management was smoother throughout as the white circle filled the screen, while the LG G1 showed a slight dip close to full fill white. When I put up a peak white 10% window pattern in HDR on both TVs for 10 seconds, then switched to a full fill gray slide, the presence of the aluminum heatsink also helped the Sony A90J clear up the resulting image retention faster than the LG G1 OLED. In my review of the Sony A90J, I questioned whether the company's quad subpixel boosting technique, which made brighter colors more saturated, was still faithful to the artistic intent, and today we have the answer. In this unforgettable scene from Mad Max Fury Road, you can see that the Sony A90J came closer to matching the HX310 in terms of the roaring flames, as well as the shiny reflections of the vehicles. Of course, the Sony HX310, which is capable of 1000 nits full screen, was still way out in front, but the A90J definitely fared better than the LG G1, which rendered the flames in a more muted manner owing to white subpixel dilution. Whatever processing Sony has implemented allowed the A90J to consistently outperform the LG G1 when it came to reproduction of bright saturated colors, ranging from the fire surrounding Ares in Wonder Woman, and doomsday radiation in Batman vs. Superman, to Electro's lightning blast in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Now, since dynamic tone mapping is always active on the Sony A90J with the most accurate gradation preferred setting, we experimented with engaging dynamic tone mapping on the LG G1 in an attempt to level the playing field, and found that it not only lowered the APL or average picture level even more to retain more specular highlight detail in this particular Mad Max Fury Road sequence, but also brightened the picture in other middling scenes unnecessarily versus the Sony HX310 mastering monitor, which is why we generally refrain from using LG's dynamic tone mapping in our critical viewing. When displaying bright 1000 nit HDR movies, such as Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, the Sony A90J provided a closer match to the reference monitor than the LG G1 in terms of overall brightness and pop. We also checked out Planet Earth 2, which was graded to 600 nits, and were satisfied that the Sony A90J wasn't needlessly boosting brightness and saturation beyond what the mastering monitor was showing. Native 10-bit gradation was superior on the Sony A90J, betraying less posterization in the skies of the Martian than the LG G1. The G1 could reach this level of smoothness with smooth gradation engaged, but not without the side effect of scrubbing away some fine detail. The internal YouTube app on the Sony A90J was less refined, revealing wrong color space mapping with YouTube HDR videos. With game mode enabled, input lag at 60 frames per second measured 16 milliseconds on the Sony A90J, and under 10 milliseconds on the LG G1 with boost mode engaged. At 120 frames per second, input lag came in at 8 milliseconds on the A90J, and under 5 milliseconds on the G1. As far as HDMI 2.1 gaming features are concerned, the LG G1 has the upper hand over the Sony A90J. There are 4 HDMI 2.1 ports on the G1, which is a boon for gamers who own multiple HDMI 2.1 source devices, compared to 2 HDMI 2.1 connections on the A90J, one of which is ER, leaving you with only one HDMI 2.1 port if you wish to pass through lossless audio through ER. The LG G1 supports ALLM and VRR out of the box, while the Sony A90J is still waiting for a firmware update to unlock these features, which is at least a good few months away. Ironically, because the Sony PS5 console also doesn't support ALLM, the G1 won't automatically switch into Game Optimizer mode, whereas the A90J can automatically engage game mode as long as you enable Auto Picture mode. When displaying 4K 120 HDR video signal, the LG G1 initially exhibited some posterization due to its native gradation, but this could be attenuated by going into the home dashboard menu and switching the HDMI input icon to PC mode, resulting in smoother gradients on this quantization pattern from the Display HDR app. On the other hand, the Sony A90J suffered from obvious posterization, as if the 4K 120 HDR processing was done at 8-bit, not only on test patterns, but also in real-world gaming content such as Dirt 5 with high frame rate mode enabled. You can deploy Sony's smooth gradation decontouring filter to smooth out the posterization, but this can lead to an artificial filtered appearance, which is never as good as delivering clean native 10-bit gradation in the first place. Due to chipset limitations, the Sony A90J cannot support both 4K 120fps and Dolby Vision at the same time. You will have to choose between one or the other. Technically, the LG G1 should be capable of supporting 4K 120fps gaming in Dolby Vision, but the television is still awaiting a firmware update to unlock this feature for the Xbox Series X. The G1 has well-implemented HDRG support, providing an 800 nit hard clip to prevent undesirable double tone mapping in HDRG-compliant games. The A90J doesn't support HDRG. You can disable HDR tone mapping to run the HDRG calibration procedure on the Sony PS5 or Xbox Series X, which should hard clip at 1000 nits, then switch to gradation preferred. But the results won't be as good as the proper HDRG support on the G1 not only in games, but also on the PS5 home screen where the A90J appeared dimmer than the G1. In SDR games where HDMI 2.1 wasn't needed, the tables were turned, with Sony's superior upscaling helping the A90J render fine detail in a slightly sharper fashion with more depth, making it easier for us to pick out random objects on screen, such as the sand texture on the beach, or the faraway trees in Genshin Impact. Another edge the Sony A90J held over the LG G1 during SDR gaming was that its peak luminance setting could still be bumped up to high to achieve a brighter picture for use in a bright room, whereas the peak brightness control on the G1 was locked out in SDR game mode. With peak brightness set to high on both TVs and calibrated for daytime viewing, the Sony A90J could go brighter than the LG G1, again likely thanks to the presence of the additional heatsink, making the A90J more suitable to be installed in a very bright, sunlit room. However, note that with peak luminance set to high, the Sony A90J is more likely to undergo logo detection auto-dimming, as you can see in this football match where it started off looking brighter than the LG G1, but because of the static score box on the top left corner of the screen, after a few minutes, the A90J would gradually lower its light output until it eventually became dimmer than the G1, which is not helped by the fact that you can disable logo luminance adjustment in the user menu, as well as global sticky reduction in the service menu on the LG, whereas the Sony doesn't provide any such setting either in the user or service menu. Let's sum up. The LG G1 and the Sony A90J are two of the best OLED TVs you can buy in 2021, each with its own strengths and weaknesses. The Sony A90J is better at upscaling, gradation, and general motion handling, while the additional metallic heatsink helped the TV deliver not only the most impactful HDR, but also the brightest daytime SDR picture we've seen from a consumer OLED television. On the other hand, the LG G1 has superior HDMI 2.1 gaming features, supporting 4K 120 HDR with less posterization than the A90J, as well as ALLM, VRR, G-Sync, FreeSync, and HDRG, all of which are not available on the Sony at the time we filmed this video in May 2021. After calibration, the LG G1's near black presentation also came closer to matching the Sony XX310 reference monitor, compared with the over-brightened and over-compressed shadow detailing on the Sony A90J. Neither TV could top all the categories, but within each category, there's really no shame in coming second. It's something I wished happened to me more often. Which TV you should buy depends on your own requirements and viewing habits, and of course, your budget. Thanks again to UK online retailer box.co.uk for their help with this video. So if you are interested in getting a new television, even if it's not the LG G1 or the Sony A90J, please support this channel by considering buying from them. To watch more of our technical TV comparisons, please click here for our playlist, and I will see you in the next video.